going on, guys? It's Turin here, and welcome to another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle, I'm going to be playing the Beastmen, and I'm going to be facing off against New Bretonnia. So, actually one of my favorite matchups by far. I feel like the Beastmen do really well. The Bestigors and the Centaur herds, the Centaur herds are really efficient against Bretonnian Cav. I don't know why. Granted, they do have 34 weapon strength, and let's go ahead and take a look at the exact armor piercing. So yeah, they actually have 27 armor piercing damage, which is pretty huge. On top of that, they're extremely fast, and as you guys can see here, they are immune to vigor. So in those long battles, they really trade extremely well. So I really like these guys in this matchup, and let's get into the rest of my army. So in the front line, I do have a mixture of Gore herds and Bestigors. So it looks like I think in total I do have 4 Gore herds, which did get buffed in the most recent DLC. Bestigor herds also got a buff as well. I believe they got like 2 weapon damage and a few other minor stat tweaks, but the Gore herds actually got plus 5 weapon strength. So prior to this patch, they actually had 31 weapon strength, and now they have 36. And on top of that, I believe they got like a charge bonus and something else, but still a pretty huge nerf, and they do very well against the Bretonnian infantry. Kind of like in the same way that Savage Orcs are able to deal with foot squires and things like that, the Gore herds do really well against, men-at-arms, and they actually trade okay with the foot squires. So I really like this front line, kind of having, a hybrid front line of, some heavier troops and, some more damage dealers, I guess you could say. On top of that, I did bring a Bray Shaman with the Lore of Beasts, and then I also have a Bray Shaman with the Lore of the Wild. So I have the Flock of Doom on one and the Devolve on the other. So again, one of you guys shouted out on the channel. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. My apologies, but thank you for suggesting the idea. I really like the build, and it's actually quite fun. So thank you for that. I do have 2 Ungor Raiders back here who are just, they're essentially there to just provide some harass, and they're pretty good at like shooting down the Grail Reliquary. So if we find the Reliquary right now, it only has 40 armor, so that missile fire from these Ungors can do pretty well against it. So I just like to have them for some utility, and they usually do a pretty good job. I do have 2 Ungor Spears in the back. Very wise against Bretonnia, because usually Bretonnia will try and bring pretty overwhelming cav forces. As you can see over here, he has Knights of the Realm and Questing Knights, and over here he has an additional 2 groups. So having those spears in the back line, they can trade really efficiently with cav. So having them to support my Centaurs is really strong, and they can usually honestly fend off most of the cav threats. And then, of course, last but not least, I do have MORGHUR the Shadowgave, and he did get nerfed. So his Staff of Ruinous Corruption, this ability right here, normally as soon as the match started, or I guess historically, it would start counting down immediately, and by the time you were fighting, it would usually be up or pretty close to being up. So now it doesn't even start cooling down until he's in melee. So there's a long window of time before you're able to use it. Still, I think it's a pretty fair nerf. I think it's warranted, and he's much more balanced now. So I'm actually going to pause because the fighting starts pretty quick here. You can see my opponent has a blessed, I think a field trebuchet, just a regular one here. In the front line, he has a mixture of just standard men-at-arms, and I actually like this pick. These guys are kind of like the Gore herds. They're just fodder. They're extremely cheap, and will do pretty well. And of course, with the Grail Reliquary, they are immune to psychology, and they do have plus 16 leadership, sitting at 75, which is pretty good. So he's got some spearmen and arms in the wings just to kind of deal with cav, probably deal with mobile threats. Maybe he was expecting Gorbles, but honestly, I like having this bigger army, as opposed to bringing the Gorbel. I just feel like it's been more efficient for me. I don't know about, you don't put all your marbles in like that one basket, because if you have the Gorbels, you're not able to perform with them and get them on, their heroic units, essentially, you're really just going to struggle, in my opinion. So he also does have a Lord in the front line, so he, opted to go wide like me. Again, he didn't invest in, the Green Knight or other heroes. Rather, he just did a very wide army. On top of that, he does have some foot squires, and the fact that he doesn't have these heroic units allows him to get a very heavy group of questing knights here, Knights of the Realm, and then another pair of those, as well as a damsel with the Lore of Life, just with 1 healing ability. So without further ado, boys, let's get right into the business. So we're just going to advance and fight here in the forest, which will be pretty good for me. MORGHUR is a pretty solid duelist, so if I'm able to get him on the Lord here, that's going to be a pretty ideal situation. So I'm just being pretty patient here with this, the Flock of Doom and the Devolve. I'm just waiting for the fighting to start, and you can see the troops are now colliding in the jungle. And the Beastmen usually have pretty good charges on most of their troops, and these guys do have pretty good weapon strength. So if we look at that across the board, their weapon strength is 36, so they actually have 10 more. And you can see the trading in terms of just raw HP is quite a bit in my favor right there. So over here, I do have some Bestigors as well, but also on that same coin, the foot squires have an engage step. They're actually getting peppered a little bit by this ammunition, which is ammunition, of course, but the Ungor Raiders are applying some good pressure. Over here, you can see MORGHUR is dueling, and he's going to do really well here. He does have regeneration, and he does poison the enemy Lord. So over here, you can see my opponent is posturing with some of his knights looking to come in here, and over here he has a very scary flank coming, and I just wasn't aware of it, and I didn't really prepare very well. But over here we're going to get a good charge between the questing knights and the Bestigors, and I think I will definitely come out ahead here, because these poison warhounds are going to poison them, mitigate their damage, their mobility, their vigor, and a bunch of other stats, and then my guys are going to do some pretty substantial shock damage. And also on that same coin, I do bring in 2 groups of spears to support. So I send one group to go after those Knights of the Realm, and then the other group to kind of come in here and help out. Granted, you can see how well I'm trading here, and I've taken almost no damage damage whatsoever. So my opponent does retaliate using a Lore of Life, but I think it was a little bit late to use that Earthblood because they've lost so many models already that the healing isn't going to be quite as effective, and they're just taking a huge beating over there. Over here, though, my opponent does get by unscathed. I was able to sneak my hounds around and actually shut down his trebuchet because they kind of ran around his knights who were flanking, but unfortunately, these Ungor raiders here are just going to have an extremely bad time. Granted, neither of these units are designed to take out, like, cheap fodder units like this. They're still going to get in there and do pretty well. And I know how much you guys love slow motion charges against fodder units, so let's get in there and just show you this nice lancing going on. And you can see these Ungors are going to go flying through the forest. Definitely having a good time for sure. And these questing knights are definitely a little bit overkill for these units, but man, they're going to do some serious work in here. And you can see my guys just get run down in the back line. So very, very effective flank by my opponent. But I was able to trade really well over here and just absolutely destroy those questing knights. So now my troops are retaliating. They're coming through the forest. And again, guys, they are immune to vigor, so they're not going to be tired at all. And they just come through the forest here. They got their beat sticks coming over their heads, and they're just going to lay an absolute smackdown on these questing knights once they're able to saturate. I took almost no losses. So over here, I have done pretty well against his lord. He does use a heal, but I also took quite a beating on MORGHUR, actually, and it was a little bit scary, but still, I do have a very, very solid core of infantry left. So my Ungors, or excuse me, my Goreherds and Bestigors were able to win this fight against these Foot Squires and Men-at-Arms. Bestigors are, pretty strong. They do have 42 weapon strength, and what's nice is that Goreherds are a frenzy unit, so when their leadership is above 50%, they are going to be immune to psychology. And right now, you can see that Flock of Doom going off. He does use an upgraded Earthblood, but a lot of that damage is going to be mitigated by my upgraded Flock. I also have been casting Devolve and just kind of cycling the two of them. You can see the Devolve is about to go off, I think. Either that or I just casted it before, but finally, I'm able to get a Staff of Ruinous Corruption, and you can see these Chaos Spawn in here are just absolutely going to cut into these Bretonnian infantry. And though the Chaos Spawn will go down pretty quickly, they're still performing quite well against some of these Foot Squires and these Men-at-Arms, and also the Goreherds in here are just doing some serious work over here in the forest. I love the headbutts, it's always pretty awesome, but, surprisingly, that dual cast is working pretty well. Granted, I still think that the Centaurs with the great weapons were the MVPs here, but still my front line was pretty dominant. And there you go, you can see that Devolve giving -8 leadership. The Grail Reliquary is starting to get focused by MORGHUR over here, and finally I was able to get those Chaos Spawn off. It was a long time for sure before I was able to get them, so. My opponent's lord is now shaken. A lot of his troops are being surrounded and just essentially punished. And let's go ahead and take an overhead view of everything. So he does have some Knights of the Realm over here that are pretty healthy. I think they kind of were chasing my hounds off. He actually engaged over here and then pulled them back to, protect his trebuchet, which has racked up only 33 kills. Probably not worth it at the end of the day against the Beastmen. A very fast, aggressive faction. I think it's pretty hard to get value out of units like trebuchets. But still, these Knights of the Realm are going to come in and try and salvage this situation. Still, the balance of power is very heavily in my favor, but they're definitely going to skewer some of these guys. They have a pretty decent charge bonus. I don't think he was in the lance formation there, but still they're going to do some serious work for sure. So they get in there, but still, they're going to get retaliated on. They're going to get poisoned by MORGHUR more than likely. And you can see the apocalyptic vision going on, giving leadership and melee attack, and they're starting to take some pretty serious casualties. So most of the Bretonnian forces are routing at this point, but man, great performance from the Beastmen infantry. They're able to just absolutely cut through those Bretonnian troops, even with that healing. So definitely loving the Beastmen in that matchup so far, guys. And I think I've probably maybe even only lost like one game with Beastmen against Bretonnia out of maybe the 10 or 15 I played. So definitely good stuff from them so far. So cool, guys, let's go into the loading screen and check it out. So yeah, 75 kills on these Goreherds, 63, so that +5 weapon strength is pretty big for their cost. Yeah, definitely really like them. 142 kills in those Bestigors. Granted, they were fighting Men-at-Arms, but the Foot Squires kind of underperformed a little bit, to be honest. So I think as people get more used to the meta and kind of, fight against Foot Squires more, it's not going to be as bad. The Beastmen Cav are really, really powerful, though, against the Bretonnian Cav. Especially if you break the charge with Hounds, it can just be back-breaking to them for sure. Having the Devolve and I don't know if I still love the Lore of Shadows. Like, I love that pendulum, and that would have been pretty good against his Foot Squire blob. But still, I think that, I don't know. I guess the Devolve was really good, and so was the other AoE ability, the Flock of Doom. So, interesting stuff. Beastmen got some diverse strategies for sure. You can do Vanguard with Khazrak. You can do this type of a build with the dual, Devolve and Flock of Doom, which, doesn't seem too overpowered. I mean, because the Flock of Doom was pretty heavily nerfed, and Devolve got a minor buff, so it kind of all balances out. Also you can do Shadow, Lore of Shadows. There's so much going on. You can use Gorbals if you like. I still don't like Minotaurs too much in this patch because, the Knights of the Realm can just get in there and just put them down because they have low armor. Knights of the Realm with the anti-large can really, really do work against them. But anyways, well played to my opponent, Sergeant Major. Look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that game. Have an excellent night, and take care.